Welcome to number 3 in the series on building an epic photo case. First video we looked at some of the plans, the ideas I've got for this. We'll see how those work out. The second we looked at some of the materials that have come in, and today it's all about the build. First thing I'm going to do is work with the foam. Now this foam will come in later once I've built the case, got all the sections ready, measured all the lenses, everything's fine. So we're going to leave these alone for now and really focus on this one here, the foam that's going to go in the bottom. Now originally I really wanted some black or red foam. The truth is though, this sits down below everything. All of the DIY Trek Pack's going to sit on top, and then pieces of one of these two colors are going to sit inside each cell to build up from the bottom for each lens or item that goes into the case. So the color of this really did become an irrelevancy as I started putting it together. Now this is much bigger than I need. It was the smallest piece I could buy, at least online at the time. Now I need to cut this to match the inside of the case from Everything Summer Camp. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm not sure if this is the best knife to be using for this, if there's a better device or type of knife. I'd say this does a pretty good job of cutting it. It's not as straight as I would like it to be, but it will certainly be good enough. Let's go ahead and put a little piece of wood underneath here to protect the surface of the table. Well, the proof is in the pudding. Does it fit? And I'd say it fits like a glove. The next task will be to create the DIY Trek Pack, which will go from the top of the foam. It won't come right to the edge of here because there's a bit of a bevel down. So if that's 6 inches, I'm going to call it 5 3/4 inches will be the height. All right, my first miscalculation. I had taken the full width, 36 inches of the Coroplast, and assumed that I could use that around the perimeter of the case. I can't. I forgot you need to have the flutes facing up so we can drop the pins into it and connect it. So now instead of 36 inches, I've only got 24 inches. Now it'll still work. I had just hoped that I could use 2 pieces, 36 inches, cut them in the corners, and I'd only have 2 pieces on the perimeter for strength. This will still work, just wasn't quite what I was hoping for. Now, what we've got here is the 4mm foam, self-adhesive. I could, I suppose, try cutting strips of this and strips of this and putting them together. I think it's going to make more sense to completely laminate the one to the other and then cut it into 6-inch or 5 3/4 inch strips. Now, cutting through both materials, it's fairly soft. I don't know if I'm going to have any issues with straightness, but that's the way I'm going to approach this, at least initially. Let's see what happens. Something else I just thought about, when I take these pins and drop them down between, there's really a couple of choices. Now I've got just unlaminated so far, this simulating one edge. I looked at this a bit in the previous video, but I want to be a little more careful now. When I take this edge and bring it up at a right angle, it'll either be the edge of a flute that's up against the foam, or it'll be all the way across a flute, and both of those are quite a different measurement. So I'm just going to test which, see that's pretty loose there. That's not really going to hold anything in place. So I think, like the opposite end of this one, I have an entire flute worths of distance here. You can, I don't know if you can see that with my finger, probably again not, but let's just see if that feels a little better. To drop a pin into there. Yeah, that's what I'm going to need to do. So when I trim these, let me see if I can get this up. Not sure if the autofocus of the camera will catch it here, but I need to make sure I've got an entire flute worth exposed on the ends of each time that I cut it. In other words, I won't cut it right there. I'll cut it just before that flute right there, and that'll give me an end like I see here, and I think that'll be a nice way to fit these together. It seems to cut pretty easily. It doesn't give a lot of resistance, and I think it's going to be fairly straight through it. It doesn't seem to want to twist the knife either way. I think I did a very good job of capturing it pretty much exactly where I wanted to for that edge. All right, let's go ahead and measure into it 5 3/4 inches, and that'll give us our first piece. All right, I just cut the first piece. I am very pleased with that. I think that's exactly what I wanted it to look like. That is going to do the trick wonderfully. Now, before I go any further, let's do one more check to make sure the height of this fits inside the case, because if that doesn't, and I cut a whole bunch of others, I'm in deep trouble. I'm going to call that a perfect fit. All right, I've cut 3 of them so far. They went beautifully. They look fantastic, and they're actually quite sturdy. At this point, I'm very glad that I went with the 4mm instead of the 2mm. So far, it looks great. One thing I did want to check, these were sitting like this. So I have one little bit left here. I'm going to put some more of the foam on here. I wanted to see how good the adhesive was, so let's just take a look. And I would say it comes off, but it's leaving foam behind. It's very stuck on there. I mean, just along the edge here, grabbing it, trying to get it off. It's not like it can't come off, but it's with effort. So I'm pretty pleased at the adhesiveness of the foam itself. Okay, so I've created a number of boards here, these dividers. They're fantastic. This took 2 pieces of Coroplast and 4 pieces of the foam. The question now is the corners. How do we get them in the corners in a way that's sturdy? So what I don't want to do is simply take them and have them butt right into the corner, one against the other. It won't be very strong. So what I need to do is figure out the best way to bend it around the corner. So what I've done is taken just an offcut during the process of building this and said, well, what would happen if I just took this and bent it? And the truth is, it's not too bad. I think that would work. It creates a dimple in the corner here that I'm not thrilled about, but the outside I think will remain fairly flat in the corner. But it really fights to go against that. And as this gets longer, of course, it'll even be more so. So then what I did was I took and cut out a piece. Tried this, and I think that's going to create a nicer corner. It's not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. It's still got the strength that, of course, they're attached, but it's not fighting so much to bend back to its original position. So I think I'm going to take next one of these larger ones and try to cut out a section of it, just like I did in the small one here, and see what happens on the corner. Okay, the challenge is to how to cut all the way down through here without cutting too far. I've taken my knife and pushed the blade back far enough that it can only go through one layer of the foam and the Coroplast, but not any further. So I'm just going to pick a point along here. It doesn't really matter where. I'm going to start just pushing the knife in a little bit, and the same over here, like that. And then I will use those 2 marks to cut down through the length of the Coroplast and the foam, but again, not too deep. Perfect. Exactly what I was hoping for. So now I'm going to bend it out even further, and I can cut these away. And now I think that's going to make a great corner. Yep, it's going to fit really nice. All right, so I've got the first 2 corners cut, This one fits quite nicely into that corner. The other one fits, and they come very nicely together in the corner. Now the only thing I'll have to do is drop a pin in at the top, and I'll put a pin in at the bottom as well. Let's see how that works out. All right, and here we see the problem. The place that they both ended up getting cut means that the pin has no purchase. I can't stretch it wider to get it around. So either I rebend that pin or find something else, but right now this is just fortuitously not the right combination of widths. Okay, here's the width of the default staple. I've taken a pair of pliers and made a couple that are just a little bit wider, and they should drop in just beautifully. Nice and snug on that one. Of course, I'll flip it over and do the other end as well. Nice and snug. That's really going to work well. Then I should be able to take this, push that into that corner, push this into that corner. All right, so now I've done the back, and well, let's grab the camera and turn it. You can see that corner as well. So now I've just got to do the sides closest to me that you can't see right now. All right, I've cut everything, I've placed everything. Here's the last piece to go in. Oh, look at that, it fits beautifully. Okay, let's drop in pin. Nice and snug. All right, I can see another problem. As I start to put in the dividers in the various places that they will be, the pins on the outside here, they won't be a problem to drop them in. But the pins over here, they're underneath this lip that is the tray slider. And I'm pretty sure that even though I could get a couple of them by perhaps pulling in the side, dropping the pin on, as soon as I get too many of these pieces in here, this thing's going to become very rigid and very difficult to manipulate. So I can't see any way around it. I'm going to have to take out these screws along the edges here and remove these trays for now. And that's not exactly a great thing, because it's going to weaken these screws when they go in the next time. So I guess the next time I drop these screws back in to replace them, I'll have to put some wood glue with them. Hopefully that won't diminish the strength of them. Now I've got 3 different places on the plan that a partition will go front to back on the case. So I need to know what that gap is across there. Pretty difficult to get a ruler in to measure and get the ruler flush. So the easiest way to do it is just to take something like this, push it firmly up against one side, take the ruler firmly up against the other side. That's 69 millimeters, and then just measure the width of the initial thing, which is 350 millimeters. Add them together, you've got your final answer. Before I go too much further, I think it's important to start putting some tabs in place. So I'm going to create some of the tabs that fold around these. Now these tabs are by no means essential. This is what Trek Pak did with their system. I'm certainly replicating that here. I think it looks nice, and should these dividers need to be reconfigured, the tabs certainly will make that a little bit easier. So here's a default tab. And then let's see, that's going to be perfect. Got to think about how long I want that to be. Let's go ahead and wrap that around. I think that works really well. That's not coming apart under any circumstances. It's got a good sense of grip to it. I think that's going to look great. It's going to work great. You might be wondering, how difficult is it, and what's the best way to remove these staples from the bricks that they come in? It's pretty simple. Take a pair of needle nose pliers, grip one of these on the spine, and just give it a tug. It comes right off. It's pretty simple. Now for the times in the case when I needed something a little wider than this, I needed to expand it. These are not infinitely malleable. If you start bending them too much, they will break. What I found fairly straightforward is to grip in here with the needle nose pliers right up against one side, bend it by hand, gripping it very close to the needle nose pliers, just a bit out, not all the way, because if you start trying to bend it too far by hand, you'll start bending the rest of it instead of just at the hinge. Then with the straighter, flatter pliers, I'm going to come in and grip it right on the bendiest part right there and give it a hard push. That gets it almost completely straight. Then I move the pliers over just a little bit, and with my thumb fairly close in, I just push down. And now I've created a staple that's wider than it was before. And of course, the distance away that you push it determines the width of the staple itself. Works really, really well. Okay, the partitions right now, I'm just testing this out. They're all loose, just sitting here loosely. So I'm going to grab the old 6D body. Let's drop that in here. I think that's where I'd like it to be. Okay, so that's where I'm going to drop the first pin in against that back partition. Okay, I think that's great. Now on the other side over here, I don't want to eyeball it. I'm going to actually count the number of holes in the coroplast across to make sure that this one is the exact same distance. If I'm not careful, by the time I start working my way across the case, I'll end up with errors accumulating. So I really want to be cautious to get it right starting from the beginning, and of course as I work my way across. Throughout this build, you might have wondered what this foam is for. I've got it in red, I've got it in black, but I think I'm going to use the red just for the color contrast. The idea here is that I've got some lenses, for example, this Samyang or Rokinon, what is this? Samyang 24 millimeter. I want to drop that in here. Now, you can see that there's clearly some extra room above that. In fact, we could even measure that. What I want to do for two reasons is take, let's set that aside, some of that foam, and I've cut some of this to width already, place it underneath, and I'll get two benefits out of doing that. One, these cavities I won't have to reach into them so deeply for some of the shorter lenses, so it raises them up. It also gives them certainly more padding, more cushioning. But the third is that when these smaller pieces are placed in between, it will keep the bottoms of these dividers from wobbling like this. So it builds rigidity and strength for the whole mechanism, even when it's used piece by piece. So in this cavity over here, I can't really see it on the camera, but when I drop this camera body in, you can see for this camera body, the 6D, the foam that I have in there would be too deep. The camera rises up and it'll hit the sliding tray. For the EOS R, it will drop in there quite nicely, and the foam at the bottom will provide that little bit of lift to it. So as many cells as possible throughout the case, I'd like to use the foam at the bottom for the side-to-side rigidity, but also raising things up and of course just overall cushioning. And here's a great example of this. I've made 4 layers of foam here so that this long 70-300 Tamron lens can sit at this nice high level, and I want it to reach down to have to grab it. And I'm going to leave enough of a gap here so that I can reach into the cavity and easily retrieve that lens without having to struggle to get it out of there. So I've hit the stage where I'm about halfway, maybe 2/3 done, and I have to say it is not at all going as I planned. It's going well as far as things working and fitting, and the system being extremely good. I'm very, very happy with it. The challenge is the way that I had measured things and kind of expected them to work just isn't panning out exactly. So small discrepancies, when I started building some of the cavities, they kind of add up, and it just means that things don't fit the way I thought they would. Also, I had measured some things incorrectly, some cases like this one here with audio equipment. I'd measured it initially a little bit wrong, and it didn't fit where I thought it would. I had to give it a different cavity. So as I'm about 2/3 done, I'm kind of taking a break, I'm stopping, I'm going to reevaluate what's left. So I'm starting to kind of plot out who doesn't have a home and where might it fit. Because I don't have a lot of room left, so I want to be fairly careful with it. I also have a case on order at Amazon for batteries and cables. That's going to go in this one here. So what I'm doing is just making markers that say what it is. I'll just drop that in there so I don't repurpose it for something else, and continue from this point forward. Well, the build is done, and I'll say it was more work than I thought it would be, and it was probably more fun than I thought it would be. Along the way, I had to troubleshoot different things where things wouldn't fit. One of the bigger challenges was my miscalculation of how much room things would take versus when you start really putting it together and fitting things in the right way you want them, does it really fit that way? And it just doesn't. It mostly worked out fine. But after I got about the first half done, I had to really think through the last half, reconfigure things. I made some changes in just things I wanted in the case and other things I didn't want in the case. So that's just my choices. But along the way, I had to adapt and change, and that's fine. And the system really was quite flexible in allowing me to do that. So I guess the last thing to do is take a tour. I'll show you what it looks like. I'm really quite pleased with it. Of course, as you can see, I've put the rails back in. One thing I did do was inside this container here, I lined it with the EVA foam on the bottom and on the sides. I really don't want the smaller items that will be laying around in here to be rattling around and making a lot of noise. So I think that was a good decision. As you can see, not every compartment is full. Some still have some items that I haven't put in them. I'm also going to place some white labels on the lens caps here so I can identify the lenses without having to pull them out, particularly if it's a bit dark. That'll be very helpful. I have weighed the case with the contents as they sit at the moment, and it's about 50 pounds. All in all, I have to say I'm very pleased with the build and the final results. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this build process as much as I did. If you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so, and if you are subscribed, down here somewhere there's a bell and it will notify you when I create new content. If you're interested, leave comments below and I might create yet another video of the case in action, if you want to call it that, out in the field when I go on site to do a shoot. As always, be safe and be kind.